Hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about some books that I've changed my opinions on. So the one thing that I really hate about being a reviewer on BookTube is that my opinions are always solidified as they are when I made that video, and it's very hard to make an amendment to that statement other than to delete the video. So I wanted to take some time today to talk about just a handful of books that I've noticed over a time of reflection from when I read the book to where I am now. I feel differently about them, whether that be positively or negatively. I do want to make a few quick disclaimers before going into this video because anytime I say a mildly negative thing about a book on my channel, there's always a huge discourse in the comments. So firstly, no one's opinion on a book is ever wrong. Reading is a solitary activity, and it's awesome that we have the internet to interact with so many different people and share our opinions, but one does not invalidate the other, even if we completely disagree. So if I make a negative judgment on a book that you happen to love in this video, it is in no way a personal attack on you. I am not trying to change your opinion. I am just expressing mine. And if anything, I understand why you love it so much, because any of the books that I feel a little bit more negatively about now are ones that I originally loved. I think that really covers it. Let's just try to be respectful of each other's opinions in the comments, and we'll start off with my first book that I've changed my opinion on, which is 50 Shades of Grey. Now, if you have been on my channel since I think about winter 2015, you'd probably know that I loved 50 Shades of Grey. At the time I read it, it was like right when the first movie was coming out, and I even made a few videos dedicated just to 50 Shades, namely defending 50 Shades and why you should read 50 Shades Darker. Those have both currently been taken down from my channel. My journey with 50 Shades started during a big snowstorm, probably the biggest we've had in years, where I was off of school for like a full week. And one night I just like sat in my bed. I picked up a book that I had just because my mom and my sister had read it so many years ago. The movie was coming out, so I was interested. I devoured the books. I thought they were fun and entertaining and lighthearted, and they were very new because at the time I was still kind of like a newbie to YA. I'd only been reading YA for like a year at that point. So it was new and exciting to me. I was like 18 or 19 at the time, and I definitely did not have the critical reading skills I'm trying to develop now, but I was just really focused on finding an entertaining story. That's all I cared about, is something that made me feel good. My support of 50 Shades lasted about a year and a half. I was like really in depth with it right around when I had first read it, when the movie was coming out. And then as the second movie was coming around and I had kind of distanced myself from 50 Shades over the years and there was more discussion about it, I realized that there were more problems in it than I had originally recognized, or even more problems than I wanted to admit there were. In the way that Christian treats Anna, that he is so possessive over her, he sometimes kind of sees her as an object, and there's a lot of actions that he takes that are just way too controlling for me to ever condone personally at this point in my life. Sure, it may have had an interesting plot to my teenage self, and it has the kind of tensiony romance that a lot of people like to read, but the romance that I realized is so unhealthy and toxic over time is really what set me off from the books and made me not want to continue supporting the franchise. Being a conscious consumer, I just can't feel good about reading these books or watching these movies knowing that this relationship is not something that I personally agree with, so that's why my opinions on 50 Shades have changed. It's just been a lot of growing up personally and realizing that the previous beliefs I had about 50 Shades were not necessarily true to myself. Also, the writing is really bad. The next book that my opinions have changed on is Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. Now, this is a book that I do still consider myself to love. I talked about it in my favorite trashy YA novels. There's a lot of personal significance with Anna and the French Kiss to me because it was one of the first YA contemporaries that I read, and it was super fun at the time. But again, just growing up and being more conscious of the content of this book made me not like it as much, and I've definitely thought about it differently since. Again, I was 18 when I read this book and I just wanted an entertaining story, but the one thing that always bothered me about it was the emotional cheating. The fact that Etienne can be in a relationship with one girl and is constantly flirting with a lot of other girls, that he is admitting to having feelings for a different girl while being in the relationship with this person, and even sleeping in the same bed as her for 3 nights, knowing that he has a girlfriend. It always made me uncomfortable, but I kind of looked over it because I loved the gushy romance so much. But the more I think about it, the more I am like, this is not okay. I don't ever support cheating in books, and relationships that are built on cheating are just there's always a part of me that even if I love it, I just can't fully agree with it. And Anna and the French Kiss has been like boiling into that for a very long time for me. And it sucks because like when I think about Lola and the Boy Next Door and Isla and the Happily Ever After, and I think about the cameos of Anna and St. Clair, like I still love them together. Like I love them in the future, but I can't fully support their relationship because it is built on emotional cheating, and that is so wrong to me. Additionally, after Lily C. Reads, who is a fantastic Australian booktuber, she posted a rant review that's like 30 minutes long on Anna and the French Kiss. So if you're interested in hearing more perspectives on this book, highly recommend it. But when I watched that video when it came out, she really opened up my eyes to the slut shaming that happens in this book and Anna's view of other people, which I also don't agree with. Anyone who likes a guy or that dates a guy that Anna likes or has some form of relationship to, even if that relationship is long over, is beneath her, and she just like is constantly judging people for the way that they present themselves in their clothes and their demeanor when she does similar things throughout the book. Lily does a great job of explaining it, and I'll link her review below. But that just also as well, like the girl hate and the slut shaming stuff that isn't like necessarily like a make it or break it in a book for me, because I understand YA was a different time back when this book was published, and a lot of books carried these themes, not saying it's okay, but it was more tolerated in the publishing world and in readers. But for me now, like my opinion has just changed. So I do still love Anna and the French Kiss. It's always going to be like a teenage contemporary that I'm going to look back at and say I enjoyed, but over the years, just the emotional cheating and the way that Anna treats other girls has made me uncomfortable enough to see this book in a different light, and that's not a part that I'm going to be able to separate from the books anymore. Let's have a change of pace real quick and talk about a book I originally didn't like, but now really do, and I've told this one on my channel before, so I'm sure you can predict what it is, and that is the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. If you haven't been on my channel before and you haven't heard this story, I'm sure this is a huge shock to you because everyone knows that Cassandra Clare is my favorite author and my favorite series of all time is the Mortal Instruments series. But the first time I read the Infernal Devices series, I hated it. I was so angry at the end of Clockwork Prince that like I accidentally ripped my library book and like I just kind of like brushed it off. It wasn't too bad or anything, but I was that mad that like I just didn't realize there was damage I was inflicting onto the book. The easy reason to explain why I didn't like the Infernal Devices at first is there was no Jace. Yes, you heard that correctly. I was 17 when I read the Infernal Devices for the very first time, and this was after me reading the Mortal Instruments 4 times in a row, being like at the peak of my obsession. And I had decided, I was like, you know what, I should probably experiment with some of her other books and see what she's writing about and whatnot. So I gave the Infernal Devices a try, and it just did not compare to the Mortal Instruments in my mind. I was so invested in those characters and their story and their plot that this just felt completely mediocre to me. I wasn't interested in it at all. I thought it was so boring. I didn't like the characters. The love triangle made me crazy because I did not like Jem and Tessa together whatsoever. Like, I disliked these books so much at first that I literally rated them 1 and 2 stars on Goodreads, which like I never do. So you know I really didn't like it at first. What I love about the Infernal Devices is you can actually watch my transformation of how I feel differently about these books, because in that first TMI versus TID tag that I did, like the Mortal Instruments won 9.5 to 5. I hated everything in the Infernal Devices. And then I think it was in like September of 2015, either my favorites video or my September wrap up, I had just recently read the Infernal Devices. And I had really enjoyed them. Like, I think I was just in a position where I wasn't so attached to the Mortal Instruments and it wasn't the only thing in my head that I was able to view it as a separate entity and not necessarily compare it to the Mortal Instruments every 5 seconds. I definitely just needed to grow as a reader in order to appreciate these independently from Cassandra Clare's first series, and I'm so happy I did because now I love the Infernal Devices and I've had the best time rereading them since. So this is definitely a very positive change in opinion. Like, I love these books now. I love rereading them. I consider them one of my favorite series. And so like I'm so happy that like I just grew up and I was more mature and I stopped being bitter and petty and I was able to appreciate these books for what they're worth. The next one might be a big shocker to those of you who love my mental health recommendations because I've never talked about this before, but another book that I see a little differently now is Made You Up by Francesca Zappia, which is still one of my favorite books. I love this book so much. It's still one of my absolute favorite standalones of all time, but after having some experiences related to this book and hearing other perspectives, I do see it a little bit differently. So Made You Up follows a teen named Alex who has schizophrenia. And what I loved about Made You Up, and I still love about Made You Up, is that Alex does not only suffer from auditory hallucinations, she suffers from visual hallucinations, which is something that is never recognized. And as somebody who also suffered from visual hallucinations as a part of my psychosis, it is the first time I ever really felt identified with that part of my mental health journey. Made You Up has always been so special to me for that reason, and it is still special for me. Like, the significance this book holds for me has not changed whatsoever. But after I've talked about Made You Up on my channel so much, and I've had other people share their experiences reading this book, I've realized that for people who have actually been diagnosed with schizophrenia, a lot of them don't feel like this book is a good representation of what it's like to live with that condition. A few examples of the critiques I have heard is that apparently in this book, delusions and hallucinations are used interchangeably as synonyms, which they are not the same thing. I honestly do not remember this. It's been a really long time since I read Made You Up. I also read it in like 2015. So it's possible that I could have skipped over it, but I did know the difference at the time, and I feel like that's something I would have picked up on. But, you know, if it's there, and that's an issue. What I think is the most disappointing part of reading reviews from people with schizophrenia is that apparently Francesca Zappia did not do a lot of research on schizophrenia before writing this book. This is all stuff that I've heard, like through hearsay. I haven't heard of a specific source that has confirmed it. I'll do another little bit of research before I upload this video, so maybe I can find it and link it below. But apparently she started writing this book at 16, and she didn't really have a good grasp on what schizophrenia was, and she just wrote it off of like what she thought it was like, which is a really big problem because when you're writing about an illness that millions of people experience, you have to do your research in order to represent them properly, and to not do any is such a disservice and so disappointing because this book represents me so well, but it doesn't represent the people that it's supposed to represent. And that's a real shame. So Made You Up will always be a crucial book that represents my identity, and that has not changed, and I will still speak of this book in that way. But when I do talk about it now, I will be sure to make those critiques known and to speak about the people who actually suffer from schizophrenia and how they have perceived this book, because it's so important to hear from their voices as opposed to mine. So again, this is a book that I absolutely love, but I do have to view it differently after hearing the experiences of other people, and that's an okay thing to do. So we have one more book that we have to talk about, and I don't want to talk about it. It's been so long. Can I just let it die? Why did I decide to make this video? So the final book for my video on books that I've changed my opinions on is Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. I want to be candid that I was paid by HarperCollins to produce an honest review for Carve the Mark in the months leading up to its release, but again, it was an honest review, and everything that I said in that video is entirely my honest opinions at the time. If you think that I would lie about what is inside the book and what my feelings on this book are because I was being paid for it, please fucking unsubscribe because you clearly do not know me at all. That video is still up. You can watch it. I also had a Goodreads review that I did update after what I'm going to talk about happened, but Goodreads does not allow sponsored reviews on their site, so I had to take it down. When I first read Carve the Mark, I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 4 or 4.5 stars. Like, I thought it was a really interesting sci-fi world. I was super excited for the rest of the duology. I loved the characters, and none of that has changed. I still feel that way about this book, and I can admit that there are problems in other aspects, but other parts that I can still enjoy. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the controversy. You can fucking Google it. There's enough reviews talking about it. I don't really have to at this point. After my fellow booktubers and I had posted our reviews of Carve the Mark, a different review surfaced claiming that this book contained harmful racial stereotypes and tropes like the dark-skinned aggressor or the kinky-haired savage. If I can find that review, I will link it below. Otherwise, I will link a very similar one. But after that discussion had started, there were even more discussions on this book's portrayal of chronic pain and its portrayal of self-harm. This discussion went on for like 7 months, and me talking about it now is probably gonna spark another one. But I'm not here to tell you, is Carve the Mark racist or not? That's not my place. I'm not having this discussion. But I do feel like this video would be incomplete if I did not mention Carve the Mark, because I do see it differently now. There were a lot of people who read this book and were hurt by it. Same with people with schizophrenia who read Made You Up, or even people who are victims of domestic abuse and read 50 Shades of Grey. It happens all the time. It's always a shame when a book has a negative impact on a large specific group of people. So whether or not I personally feel that this book did or did not promote harmful stereotypes about people of color, like, it still hurt people, and that's going to cause me to see this book differently. Like, there is no way for me to see this book the same way I did in November of 2016 and the way I see it in in November of 2017. There's no possible way for me to separate the two. So everything I said in that first review still stands. I still like the characters, I still like the science fiction world, but I just don't plan on continuing with this duology when the second book comes out, and I can't really separate all of the discussion that has happened because of it. Please let us not get into a discussion if Carve the Mark is racist or not in the comments of this video. This is not why I posted it. I just wanted to share the journey I've had with certain books on changing my opinions, whether it be positive or negative. So that really concludes my video on books that my opinions have changed on. There are definitely so many more. Like, it's very hard to harbor these same exact ideals you had when you read a book for the first time and to have them years later. But I thought a lot of these were particularly interesting and maybe something that a lot of you guys could relate to. And you know, feel free to share your opinions on any of the books or any of the comments that I've made. I try and keep this channel an open place for discussion, to not attack people for their personal beliefs on books. I hope I have made that clear, that I don't care if you love or hate these books. I don't care if you feel indifferent about them. This was just my personal experience. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye! Oh my god, I just did my outro wrong.